Fine, Darren.
There we go.
All right, you're all set, Mr. Grabowski.
Hey, Darren, new toys. I'd like to call the Tuesday, September 5th, 2023 Charleston County School District Audit and Finance Committee meeting to order. First item on the agenda, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to postpone item 3C, which is the ESSER update report. I'd like to put it and move it up on the agenda under item 1C after the approval of the minutes. Can I have a second?
Second.
The
So this will be, I'm sorry, this will be 1D.
Yeah, it'd be 1D. That's correct.
Okay.
And I'm doing this. I felt that the ESSER object on the agenda is something that Dr. Gallion insight would be greatly appreciated. And Dr. Gallion has a prior engagement tonight, and he may have to leave us early. But, and that. With that being said, can I have a vote on the agenda? Any objections? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted as with the amendment. On to item 1C, which is approval of minutes, August 1st, 2023. I hope everybody's had an opportunity. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
All against? Hearing none, the motion approves and the approval of the August 1st, 2023 minutes. So we'll move on to item 3C, which is an ESSER update. Ms. Carlin.
Thank you. Okay, so our ESSER update through the end of July 31st. As you all know, ESSER 1 funds have all been spent and reimbursed to date. For ESSER 2, actual spent for fiscal year 24 is $146,000 and currently encumbered is $71,000 with a remaining of $2.1 million. The question is, are we going to be able to spend all of that through the end of September 30th? And the answer is yes, we're working through that right now. And then reimbursed to date is approximately $64.3 million. This information does not include the claims that we filed on August 15th. So, and then going to ESSER 3, FY24 actual spent to date is $241,000. And we have close to $912,000 encumbered through July 31st. The remaining to be spent is approximately $82.7 million. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Gallion.
So thank you, Ms. Carlin. Just wanted to update the committee on a couple of things as it relates to ESSER. One is later this month, I think September 26th, the auditors, they come on. So the auditors that are going to be auditing all of the ESSER 1, 2, and 3 areas are going to be on site later this month, and we look forward to engaging with them. And another update for the committee is that we have extensively gone through the plans, and we continue to go through the plans in an effort to try to get to the board's goal of providing some type of bonus to teachers. So as we continue to go through that process, we have a few different options that we're going to be looking at. And so I want the committee to know that that work is still underway.
Thank you. Do you have any questions from any of the committee members? Darren?
Yes. Would this be something that the auditors will be looking at as well?
In terms of the bonus?
Right.
Yeah, they're going to look at all how we expend it, what we have contracts around, whether we met the federal guidelines and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Any other further questions from board members? I have a few. Ms. Carlin, in past reports, we normally get a sheet that lays out all of the expenditures. This month, there wasn't a sheet.
It is located online. We can continue to add that to the attachments on the Audit and Finance Committee. But I'm sorry, we thought everybody realized that it was online, but we
Okay,
can.
so in the future going forward, you would prefer us to go online and print it out on a monthly basis?
Yeah, or thank you, Dr. Gallion. He mentioned we could put a link in board docs so that you could very easily find it. We could do that as well.
That's fine.
Okay.
I just remember it was always like,
Yes.
it was one or the other. So the link would be fine.
Okay.
I mean, just trying to clear as we move forward, because I'm assuming we did spend some money.
Yes, sir.
A lot of it is, and I guess this is going to go in line with how we're going to be talking to the auditors and defining them in looking at this. Because one of the things in a lot of the recent requests that have gone out is the specific documentations and records that have been maintained and tracked the utilization of ESSER funds. I know I've asked for some type of access to it. I know Mr. Cobb responded to an email that the chairman sent out regarding some documentations that have been provided to the superintendent. So I'm assuming those are being vetted.
I'm going through those to make sure they're accurate, and then I'm going to be sending them to all the boards.
Excellent. Was one of the questions that was asked to me. The other one, which I think is going to go more towards the academic side, is providing some type of summary of the impact of the funds that have been spent to date on the educational outcomes, particularly considering the COVID-19. So I want to make sure that, the academic is aware that that's going to be something the board is really looking into and something that the committee is going to start, watching over. Because I think this will go, and fellow committee members, please step in at any time, if I breach onto a subject that you feel either needs to be expanded or limited down to what, at least the way I've looked at this. But yeah, as we've talked, Ms. Carlin, about trying to bring in, change the accounting to where we start looking at departments. I think one of the things I'm going to ask you is to think about which department, and I hope you pick an easy one, that we should probably start looking at as quickly as possible for next year's budget. And then think about a process of how the committee should, or your recommendations of how the committee should go about and looking at them. I know one of our big concerns, obviously, was in the procurement side, any expenses over, 50,000. So if we can look at that earlier rather than later, it'll make the budget process at the end of the year move quicker and smoother. And then hopefully we can eliminate some of these other reports that we've been doing. Any comments?
I support that 100% and willing to work with Audit and Finance Committee and the board to make that happen. Yes.
Yeah, because I really just think it's an out. I'm not trying to create more work on you. The other departments probably, but definitely not on you. So always take that into consideration that this is not to.
And I
it's
just
just trying to make this whole thing based upon what we went through the last 7 months.
And I want to make sure I'm referring to the same thing that you're referring to, taking that $250,000 list and basically putting as much as we can in the budget so that there's not so much going to the board, Audit and Finance Committee and the board every month on that 250 list.
And I think what it really is more of a detailed itemization of, expenses rather than the big numbers that we normally get. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on this, but
I think it would work from our perspective if there were some accommodations. The example I give is the contractors' names. If we're going to be approving this during the budget, we're not going to know the contractors' names at that time. So that's something that wouldn't be in there.
Nor would I expect it. Because obviously some of this is going to go out to bid. It would be nice to know if there are expenditures in there that you're looking at an exemption possibly, or, that I agree with you. Obviously, you're big, anything you're going to put out to bid is, I'm just looking for the hard numbers as they're broken down. I mean, we're going to get into this when we start talking about all the capital projects and how you're breaking down for the 23-28 funding area. It's pretty much the same thing because, suddenly you see these large numbers.
So, I mean, I just may not totally follow exactly what we're trying to accomplish, because to me, there's one thing is if we're trying to understand the budget and where we may be more or less efficient, if we're trying to find areas to be efficient, that's one exercise. There's a separate exercise of trying to ensure that our procurement, the actions we make in procurement are, number one, compliant with our own policies, and maybe secondarily, if we think our policies should be adjusted in some way. I perceive, and maybe I'm wrong, but I perceive those as different exercises. And so we should be clear about what we're trying to accomplish in order to make sure that the staff comes back and is able to give us what we want. And it's something that if they give us something that we can actually do something with it, right?
And that's where I'm looking for the expertise from staff as to, how we're going to, or how you would like the discussion to continue, knowing that, we really need to get going because October is right around the corner. And if you look at the normal schedule, that's when you would be starting to work on the budget, and to do it department by department. That gives us plenty of time. But I agree with you. Both are, goals that we should be shooting for.
But I would perhaps separate them in how we do it then, because the procurement exercise is different than going department by department. The department exercise may be one where you want to explore how much do we spend in this area, maybe how that's trended over time, and or how does our spending in that area compare to other comparable districts in that same arena. I can see that being a enlightening exercise. I'm not trying to minimize how much work will go into that, but
And I think it helps that I don't know what the status is with, have we hired a new procurement director? There we go. So, that's a good line to get him involved in, and then Jackie can work with us on, the department side of it, because it is two elements, and it'd be two elements that I would expect both individuals to be heavily involved in.
on the procurement, it's come up a lot. So we've talked about this around the edges in some prior meetings, but I wonder if what might be helpful on the procurement side would be, not rushed, but some, whether it's a couple months out, but whenever we do it, a review of our procurement policies and a kind of an illustration of how things work, to talk through a handful of different types of expenditures, how those work, including what I think may be especially helpful are what are the controls in place besides just the path of procurement? What are the other controls that we have in place? Because I know it's not just whether it's a board exemption, but what are the controls we have that protect the district from whether it's fraud or misappropriation or, other, inappropriate uses of, because I think if we had a broader picture of how that works, it might be helpful.
And I think this is a relevant discussion because of the ESSER and because of the, the potential upcoming audit, because a lot of what we're talking about are going to be directly related to a process that is ending, but needs a deep dive look. So now's the time to do it. And I think we're basically, hitting two birds with one stone. So that's why I brought up the questions, and then to your thought processes, because October is right around the corner. I mean, this is September. I guess it's the next audit meeting. If we're going to start moving forward on some processes, we have to have something going. Because one of the biggest questions I have on the ESSERs are the potential consequences or risks associated with the current handling of the ESSER 3 funds, especially considering that we have this upcoming deadline of September 24th. And I'm happy to hear that at least the ESSER 2 funds, we don't have to worry about. The ESSER 1 funds, we don't have to worry about. But, when you keep receiving I know it says spent on one side of the column, but that 82 million of unencumbered, I look back and that's been the same number we've had for the last 6 months. So it really, it's very confusing when you see this. Yes, you have a planning spent, but the true unencumbered number just hasn't changed at all. So, and that's, Dr. Gowan, that's where you're seeing a lot of this kickback, it's going, looks like a line item, but I think it's good to hear. Just one of the things to really look at. And I think this is going to be important, is to understanding the plans that come from staff that we're going to maximize the impact of what remaining funds we have for the benefit of the students, considering the overall health, of the finances. Because I know in my visit and talking to a lot of principals, there's a wide range on, what, now that we've gotten hopefully to about the 10-day report to know exactly what teachers we're going to need when and where. I know, at least, as I said, across the Cooper, most of the positions are 1.5, ESSER related. So, we definitely want to get to that point where we reach up into November and we can start, not November, December, or January, where we can start absorbing some of these positions. Because how many open positions do we have now in the district?
That's what we're working through right now, just find out exactly how many are not filled. We're going to set a hard deadline. If they're not filled by that time, then we'll absolutely know how many is really out there.
Great. Any further questions, Mr. Calhoun?
I'm all set.
So Michael, you okay? And Stephen, I see you've joined. Great. Good. Thank you very much. Moving on. Thank you very much, Dr. Gowan. Moving on to the action items, item 2A, the long-term general obligation bonds. Ms. Carlin.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually going to turn this over to Joyce Costello, our Director of Capital Projects Accounting.
Thank you, Ms. Carlin, and good afternoon. The item in front of you for the long-term geo obligation bonds is the intention to issue those bonds not to exceed $96 million to fund design and construction of 3 schools: Morningside Middle School, A.C. Cochran Elementary School, and Deer Park Middle School, and a land purchase for Midland Park. These 4 projects were on the sales tax referendum, thus already approved. On April 26, 2021, the board approved to fund these 4 projects with long-term debt because on the master project list, they were below the funding cut for the sales tax proceeds. The original budget for the 4 projects were $77.5 million. On October 24th, 2022, a reallocation of $22 million was added to increase the total amount for the projects to be funded with long-term debt to $99.5 million. We have, however, borrowed about $4.6 million in early out to get some design work started. Thus, this leaving the total of $96 million of long-term debt to be borrowed and issued. With that said, I'd like to pass the structure of the long-term bonds to Carol Clark, our bond attorney, and Jay Glover with PFM Financial Advisors.
Joyce, Jay, you can give, I guess, better idea of the structure. Just a couple of things that I wanted to note is that, these funds will count against the debt limit. So currently the available debt limit is just over 200 million. So this will bring the available debt limit down to a little over 100 million, but, that is a constantly changing number and increases as debt is paid down and also as assessed values increase. And we should, within the next week or so, be getting the 2023 assessed values. So there's no reason to believe that that number won't go up. And I'm sure Jay will touch on this, but another thing to point out is that the district has had a policy that they want to put kind of an end date on the current long-term debt, which is currently 2032. And these funds will be retired in full on February 1st, 2032. So it's not extending the long-term debt out any further than that deadline. Otherwise, it's fairly straightforward. We're working on the documents now. Plan to take it to the board at the end of September, and then we'll be in a position to sell the bonds the following week. And then we're looking at closing on the issue around about October 19th. So then the funds will be in the bank to move forward with construction on these projects. And Jay, you want to weigh in on any further details of the structure or the market?
Yeah, sure. Jay Glover from PFM Financial Advisors, the district's financial advisor. I think Carol hit on one of the key elements of the structure. The district has a goal of being essentially debt-free by 2032. So we're not planning to extend beyond that with the amortization of these bonds. So they'll be paid off within less than 10 years. And if you recall from a prior Audit and Finance Committee meeting, that's really the sweet spot of the yield curve right now, because we have a little bit of an inversion, early on where yields dip. So again, we'll be able to take advantage of what's still some fairly attractive rates. Obviously things can change over the next month or so, but I would suspect now we'd be below 3.5% in terms of our borrowing costs for this financing. So again, pretty straightforward. We're going to structure this to, stay within our 8% debt limit, but also stay within the 26 mil debt service budget that you all have put in place, which I think was 2 mils less than what we had previously done in prior years. So again, pretty straightforward, and we'll look to take advantage of this as soon as the school board approves it, assuming you do so, and lock this in. So any questions you might have, I'm happy to address.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? I know it's going forward as we look at some of these other capital projects, we're starting to see increases in the cost of finishing out some of these ongoing projects. I guess the big issue is that, or a clarification for the public at least, is that our cost in issuing this $100 million or $96 million is only 3.5%. Am I stating that right?
Yeah, that's an estimate based on current interest rates. We wouldn't lock those in until we actually get into the market. But yes, that's what we're estimating based on, today's market conditions.
And over the last, 10 years, we've been paying extremely more than the 3.5. I mean, I don't think we have any outstanding debt right now that's below that.
Yeah.
It seems like a very smart thing to do because of that alone, as long as we're not getting close to that 8%. And Mr. Bowery here is confident he can negotiate contracts that are going to be rock solid. And
well, I'll just say we are experiencing significant inflation like we've seen in pretty much every industry. And in fact, we're coming forward with escalation request for this in this board meeting, in this committee meeting here. So we're very confident with what we're doing, how we're doing it. We're playing the same game that everyone else is and adjusting to the cost of labor and supplies.
And these 4 schools are on your top list of, they were approved in the referendum. So there's really not much, we have to say about the selection of the 4 schools.
Correct. The 4 schools were obviously a high priority. They made the referendum. It's just we based the initial funding based on the initial projections. These four fell below the line, and the board at the time voted that they be funded with 8% funds. And it, to me, it's made a lot of sense. We've been able to bring them into the fold, and we're tracking on them just like we are the rest of them. There wasn't a significant difference between the priority of these projects and other projects that are approved. There, it's very close. And you can say there's a need for every school on the list, including these. It's great that we were able to find funding for those, though.
Is there anything in our processes or how we do things that that exposes us to additional risk on these cost escalations? What I mean by that, is there anything about our approval processes, whether it's this committee or the board or internally, anything that can be done that could help you manage cost escalations more?
Well, I'll say that process as an example, the process that was added for the 250 list. That has added time to the process to execute projects at the prices that we've been given. Contractors are less likely to hold their prices for a period of time in this business. And so by us adding time to the process, we run the risk of having a contractor say, you know, my price is only good for 2 months or 30 days, and we have to pay more. If we don't.
And has that been happening?
Steve, I'll defer to you. Steve's experienced it in FM.
Any further questions? Hearing none, I would like to make a motion to recommend to the board to approve the issuance of a long-term general obligation bonds in one or more series in an aggregate amount not to exceed 96 million to fund design and construction of Morningside Middle School, AC Cochran Elementary School, and Deer Park Middle School, and Midland Park land purchase. Can I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I don't want to interrupt, but I did want to update you all at the request of Joyce and Jackie on something that you all took action on your June 6th meeting related to the installment purchase revenue bond refunding, if you'll recall. We actually closed that today, so I wanted you to make you aware of that. We priced the bonds on July the 27th, and we locked in about $6.8 million of net present value debt service savings. So you'll recall at your meeting, you approved a savings parameter of at least 4% of the refunded bonds par amount, which was going to be about $6 million. So we locked in 6.8 million, which was about 4.6% of the refunded bonds par amount. And I will tell you, on the day of pricing, the next day rates jumped a little bit. So I won't take credit for that, or I think we might have got a little bit lucky, but we did get that locked in right when the window opened up to call those bonds. And I don't want to get us off agenda here, but I did want to pass along that good news that we were able to get that transaction done and lock in the desired savings. So just want to let you all know that as well.
Savings, I can always understand. That's good news. That's very good news. We always like good news, and you should take credit, because I know the board would like to take credit for making the decision to allow you to make the decision.
Yeah.
Make the decision at the right time.
You and your staff should take credit for being proactive and giving us the opportunity to do that. So
I appreciate the good news, and I definitely applaud staff and all of our advisors, because that was a brilliant move, and the 6.8 is definitely going to be well spent, so, and needed. So good job. Okay, on to item 2B, which is a 2023 tax anticipation note. I was thinking back, is it proper under Robert's rules to read the motion first and then introduce, let you discuss it? Because that's really when we're going into the debate section, and then we just mode on it.
We've not
Yeah,
done that, not at
Darren?
Finance Committee.
What do you think about that?
No, it was basically the same thing. We're doing a discussion, but it'll be done under discussion. You need the motion in a second and then go into the discussion.
Yeah,
don't-
just like it would be. Go ahead. I'm
I
sorry.
don't see a problem with doing it that way. We're going into the discussion phase, having discussion after we had a motion in a second and have them introduce everything.
Yeah, I think that's the proper way to do it. And then we can just vote on it in that way. So the motion on item B 20, item B, which is the 2023 tax anticipation notice, is for the committee to recommend to the board that the Charleston School County District Board of Trustees adopts the resolution approving the issuance of the tax anticipation note to meet cash flow requirements. Can I have a second?
Second.
Move on to the discussion. And this one, once again, being presented by Ms. Carlin.
So each year, the district has to issue a tax anticipation note to help with cash flows. Cash flow needs until we receive the majority of our local tax revenues, which is normally between late November and early December. And based upon cash flow projections that we have in place for fiscal year 24, the amount that we're asking is not to exceed 60 million.
Any questions from the committee members? The only question I have is just a clarification. This is the exact, approximately about the same amount we asked for last year.
Yes.
And how did that work out?
Very well. We ended up borrowing, I believe it was, Carol, help me out. Was it around 57 million, 58 million?
I was thinking we had done the entire 60, but I can take a quick look here. Yeah, but it was in that area. I know we had approved not exceeding 60. And
Yeah, I just pulled it up. We approved not to exceed $60 million. And it looks like we sell these via competitive sale where we accept bids on a given day. And on that day, we got, looks like 6 bids to buy those TANs. So we'll be going through the same process here with this transaction.
Jay, are you showing the actual amount that we ended up borrowing last year?
Yeah, it was a 60 million par amount that we ended up borrowing the full amount last year.
And you feel comfortable, obviously you feel comfortable with that amount, or you wouldn't have
Yes.
presented it.
Yes, this has been vetted not only by our accounting director, but me as well. So we
Excellent.
feel pretty good about this one.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. On to item 1C, which is the approval of contracts greater than 250. There's request by staff for a motion by the committee to recommend for approval the contracts on the attached list. Can I have a second?
Second.
Oh,
I'll open it up for discussion. Ms. Carlin.
Thank you. So there's 11 projects on this list totaling $8.4 million. They include projects to upgrade paging systems, alarm systems. There's a library, renovating libraries, HVAC filter replacements, and some architectural and engineering services, as well as some construction services. Thank you.
Any questions from members of the committee?
Yeah, Mr. Hammer, can you talk about the change order for number 11, the North Charleston High School?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, members of the committee. So this change order is really not changing the contract, although that's the right terminology. It's really exercising an option. When we awarded this contract, it had a base amount as well as a couple of options. The bids came in fairly high for this contract. We're able to execute a portion of that base option, and we're able to shift some money around from some other projects to be able to execute the option. So that's why the change order. Again, not necessarily the correct nomenclature. We should use the term change order, but it's really not changing the contract.
Okay, how much is the total contract?
This total contract is $341,000.
And that's what the 205 added on?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Cool. Thank you.
Stephen, are you going to talk about the information and technology expense on items 2 and 3? That can be covered.
It wasn't. Or I've got it in mind. I've got questions. Mr. Naraki, you're there, right?
Sure. So these three projects are an extension. We had two funding sources. One was ESSER funding. Back in June, on the June 6th meeting, we approved about $4.8 million in ESSER funding. That was going to start the process of replacing the antiquated PA systems in our schools. That ESSER funding was locked down and was no longer available. So in that June meeting, I also started, in case we got ahead of ourselves, about $4 million in phase 4 excess sales tax revenue. Now that ESSER is completely gone, we're having to use all of the phase 4. So this $1.2 million for each of the 3 awarded vendors is now the balance of our phase 4 projects. And we're gonna move forward with all the schools that we can. Does it answer your question, sir?
So for clarification, that means that prior to this submission, we had been using ESSER funds to accomplish.
We had not used ESSER funds. We received approval to use ESSER funds, but we put that on hold in the interest of preserving funds for the teacher bonus. So we did not execute those that were approved in June.
But we added this in to be able to cover it under our general operating, or no, we're switched it over to the
Phase
sales
4
tax.
sales tax.
Got it. So
And that's correct, right, Tom? I see you
Absolutely.
nodding your head.
0 funds of ESSER were obligated. This was just an approval. We were getting ready to cut those contracts, but we did not proceed with that before the halt was put on those funds.
thank you for the clarification, Tom.
Yes, sir.
Any further questions?
Just curious what the splitting between the 3 different vendors, what's the general strategy for that?
Sure, absolutely. So because of the sheer volume of this, hitting every single classroom with new cabling, new speakers, new systems, it would have taken us years and years and years to make any progress on this. And because we have so many systems that are in the C4 category or the failing category, we put out a bid and awarded it to 3 vendors who basically got an equal amount of contract funding to be able to proceed and get more schools done this year.
And will they use similar equipment so that there's consistency across schools in that
So
regard?
that was the reason for standardization. So everything's identical, same system, same materials.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Barori, when will this start taking place?
Schools
Tom,
have
you want to answer that?
Oh, say it again.
Tom?
We've already started the process. We've got, I think, 4 schools now underway or completed.
All right.
Not with these 3 contracts, right?
So the June 6th approved,
Okay.
that's what we're spending now. In order to, once we get that set of schools done, which will come fairly rapidly, probably by December, we'll need these funds. That's what we're requesting, the balance of that budget so that we can continue on.
With the goal of completing it in the 23-24 school year.
Go ahead.
To spend this funding, we won't complete all of the schools, but yes, sir, to complete these contracts in this school year.
This is a, Tom, depending upon the funding, but this is a 2 to 3 to 4 year project to get all of the schools that are.
Sure. Because of this amount of funding that we have isn't enough to do all of our schools, but we're attacking the C4 schools, and that's our main priority right now. But the goal is to get every school in the district on the exact same system. And it is a multi-year under life cycle management.
And so we approve this contract. When will those costs hit our P&L? Right, as over the 3-year period, or is it all included in our expenditures this year when we approve the contract?
So Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but the 3 contracts you have listed here, you intend to complete before the end of this fiscal year or pretty close to it. So you'll
Correct.
fully expend the 1.25 million for each of these contracts this year.
So we'll spend the money, but the actual delivery, the implementation will just take a few years to execute.
So the installation of these will all be done this.
Gotcha. This is just this year's phase of a multi-year. So next year, presumably around this time, we might have a similar set of approvals. Sorry, now I get it.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Now I get it.
And how many C4 schools do we have?
A total of 31, I believe it is, sir. And this funding, without the ESSER, we should be able to hopefully get 18.
All right.
So a little more than half the schools would be left.
In C4 category, yes, sir.
C4 category. Please, from my education, C4 means what?
Condition 4, we go from green light, yellow light, red light to black. So the C4 is the systems that are no longer supported. They're not sold anymore. They're not supported, and we can't get updates or parts.
So this is all dependent on what the schools have, basically.
Yes, sir.
So I mean, for clarification, when somebody asks me, why did you prioritize it? The system the school has is no longer supported, no longer works. And that's got it.
Right.
So all of our schools fall
starting-
under life cycle management. So while, you know, we will be hitting schools in every district, constituent district, it doesn't necessarily flow on, you know, prioritizing any one school over another. It's just what's the oldest system, that one goes first.
And so what's the risk if, as we move forward, you know, obviously with technology moving on and you're looking at 3 to 5 years, I mean, if we're hoping to get this done in the next 2 years, at least we're closer to having everybody using the same system that's not going to age out. Is that my understanding?
It is, sir. And what we do is, as we're pulling the systems out, we'll be cannibalizing as many pieces and parts that are no longer available, and we'll be shelving those just to band-aid and keep things going. I don't think we're in dire straits in any means, but they are antiquated systems, and this new system provides many more technological advances than just a PA system.
And this is the first time we're installing something like this?
So our first one was actually Lucy Beckham High School during the construction.
Excuse me. And that was my next question. As we're building these new schools, or as we're building the new schools, they're going in with the new system already?
Yes, sir. And that's being paid for out of those capital funds.
Any further questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I want to make a correction on the answer that I gave to Mr. Calhoun about the value of the project for item number 11. Mr. Calhoun, that's $395,000. Sorry for that mistake earlier.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none, I'd like to ask for a vote on the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. We'll move on to item 2D, which is an action item. Let's see. Motion for the committee to request the board to approve, or recommend to the board to approve the reallocation of funds as shown on the attached resolution. Mr. Narwaki? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I was like, can I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Narwaki, I'll open it up for discussion.
Thank you, sir. So we're requesting approval to take available savings from 2 projects. One is a classroom display software replacement, and the other one is technology project contingency from phase 4, and move it into the infrastructure project, which will allow me to do some necessary life cycle replacements in our data center. The total is $151,000, $163, with a $0 variance.
Any questions from the committee? This is all being used by sales tax revenue.
Correct, sir.
Hearing no more questions, I'd like to put it up for vote. All in favor, vote aye. All against, vote nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. We'll move on to item 2E, the 2023-2028 capital programs phase 5 sales tax budget reallocation. Staff is requesting the committee to, the motion is to have the board approve a recommendation for the board to approve the reallocation of funds as shown on the attached resolution. Ms. Shaw.
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Open up for
Grabowski.
discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Grabowski and committee members. Yes, sir, this item is to use projected sales tax revenues for our one penny sales tax program, Phase 5, which is a 6-year program that extends from 2023 to 2028. In the amount of $23.5 million, this will be used to fully fund active projects that are currently underway, which is new Latson Elementary, Early College High School Support Building, Constituent 9 Elementary School Project. Construction projects bids continue to exceed their original estimates as seen in open bids that we've had for new Latson Elementary, as well as Early College. The increase, one item on here for D9 is also considered an increase due to construction market inflations due to some wetlands that was identified on site, or additional wetlands that was identified on site for the D9 elementary school project. The good news, even though we are indeed requesting use of projected revenues for D9 as well as Early College High School, the bids that came in are considered guaranteed maximum value. So we should be getting all of our schools into that guaranteed maximum price. And so we shouldn't foresee any additional requests for those two schools. Latson may be a different story, but we'll definitely cross our fingers because we know the construction market continues to increase. I will share with the committee that we have seen overall these prices increasing. So in 2021, it was about $245 per square foot. In 2022, that has increased about $284 per square foot. And now in 2023, we're seeing about $340 per square foot for schools being built, just to give you some background information on that. And that completes my reporting for these 3 projects.
Any questions from the committee members?
I assume you still have some sort of contingency in the budget because these are just entering to the contracts up front. You've got your GMP, but you're still going to have some contingency in there, I assume. Is that fair?
Ms. Costello, would you like me to answer that? Okay, so the last update we received on Phase 5 revenues, which was July of 2023, we had 115 million in excess projected revenues, plus 35 million in contingency. That was the July update.
So you have a macro contingency versus a contingency by
And
project.
we do have contingencies within the project itself, and I don't have that percentage. It might be 2%. What's the contingency, Jasmine?
Yes, sir. I think it's about 2%. That's correct, 2%.
And I assume the GMP, I assume that's your typical mode once you enter into contract on a new building. You use a GMP pretty much always, right?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Ms. Burrow, you said that was 115 million excess?
115 million in excess projected revenues and 35 million in overall program contingency. So that's 150. Now, I will point out for those that are very conservative that we have had less than projected revenues for the last, I want to say 4 months, maybe 5 months, 4 months. So our revenues have come in lower than our projections. So we're very cautious with how far we go into the projected excess revenues.
Mhm.
And all these projects are ongoing.
That's correct. So they're underway right now.
And just for clarification on the completion dates on these 3.
Yeah, so for Early College High School completion, we have as October of 2024, move in December of 2024. That's for the support building. For Latson, we are reporting that as August of 2025. And for the D9 school, we've quite honestly have this as to be determined. But we are looking at a potential August of 2025.
So I assume we still have a lot of other projects on the list, right?
Yes, sir, we do. We have several in wave 2 and also in wave 3.
And I'm assuming those projects are probably going to have cost escalations above what we were estimating at the time that we made that list.
That
Right.
is correct. That is
And-
correct.
And you don't really know until you take it out to bid what it's really going to cost, but do you, and you don't want to spend your time chasing your tail forever on re-estimating all the time, but do you either track or have a guesstimate of the aggregate estimated inflation on those projects that you haven't yet brought forward, just to the point you made about keeping an eye on our excess revenue? Do we have enough capacity? Basically, do we have enough capacity in our excess to complete what we hope to pursue? Even though we're not ready to bring those other projects forward, but they're on the horizon, right?
Yes, sir. I don't have that available at this time, but we can definitely get that number based on what the current inflation values are.
That might be a worthwhile exercise only to this extent, meaning I would suggest that you do it on a very sort of guerrilla math high level, because I know it's all tentative and it's just for the future, but it would be nice to know whether we think we have 50 million in escalated costs or 400 million in escalated costs, and how that number compares to what our excess revenue might be.
We will have that by the time you will meet again next month. We need to have that.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
by the October meeting.
Thank you.
We'll have it.
So that would be wave 2 and 3.
Wave 2 and 3, yes, sir.
And if I could just add, the projected excess revenues, those are updated really monthly. I provide the financial advisors with that information. And then every quarter, PFM does an update for the sales tax program. And also the construction managers do cost curve update. So quarterly, we are getting the most recent revenue projections and expenditures and keeping up with that. The 116 million in projected excess right now. Anytime we have an item like this, it is vetted through finance, through our financial advisors, and present to the CFO for her review too. So we have extremely tight controls on sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves.
Thanks.
Wouldn't expect anything less. Any further questions from the committee? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All against, say nay. Motion passes. We will move on to item 1F or 2F. And that's for a motion to recommend to the board to approve the reallocation of funds as shown on the attached resolution. And this deals with the 2023-2028 capital programs, phase 5 sales tax capital maintenance budget reallocation. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'll open it up for discussion.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hammer.
The purpose of this is to request a reallocation of funds that are identified in the excess revenue for the amount of $7 million for one of our capital maintenance projects. In July, I briefed to the board that we had a project that, due to some additional design requirements based on stormwater design regulations from the city, required extra funds and an additional schedule to execute. We became concerned that the time period to execute that money would cause the funds to expire. So we reallocated some of those funds to other projects, left some in the project, and this replaces and adds actually some more to that project. So it's a $7 million reallocation request, again, based on excess revenue. And again, the project in question is the Johns Island Park that we talked about in July. This should keep the project continue on the schedule that we briefed before. We'll be able to start the execution before sometime this fall and complete the project sometime in the fall of next year. Stand by for your questions.
Any question for any of the committee members? Mr. Calhoun?
Not yet. Give me a second.
So this is another one of the wave one.
So this project is relatively unique. We had initially planned, and gave it some thought to do this project with sales tax. At the start of the sales tax program, we weren't sure what the excess revenues would be. We chose to pursue fixed cost of ownership funding phased over 2 years. This was the project that came up last month, as Mr. Hamer mentioned, where we diverted funds because we couldn't execute within the given year that we had the funds. So rather than phasing this in FCO over the course of 2 years, this essentially guarantees that the project funds are available. They don't expire at the end of the fiscal year. We can continue to run this project in hopes that we won't run into any more delays and allow us to execute that project within the dollar value that we now estimate the project to be.
So have we started? We're just waiting. Once this is approved, then we're going to start.
Well, we still are finalizing or getting final approval from the city on our stormwater plan. We've gotten their input. There's a few things we have to tweak, but we know we have not begun to work on the project just yet.
And the remaining FCO funds, 700,000 roughly,
Yes, sir.
will be used for the stormwater work
Yes, sir.
that can begin immediately.
Got it.
We can't work on the fields themselves because we have spring baseball season, spring softball season. But with these funds, Mr. Hamer will look to see what work can be done off of the fields that can run in parallel
Yes, sir.
with the stormwater work. Things like the batting cages, some other site work to provide some improvements to the players out there. Oh, again, we have to wait till the end of the baseball season to actually begin work on the fields.
So there's direct benefit right away, along with you getting the site ready for future construction.
I'm sorry. So
There's direct benefit along with the site prep being considered with this money.
oh, yes, sir. Other than just, the site prep and the stormwater, there are lots of amenities that we're adding to the fields there. Yes, sir.
Any further questions from the committee members? Hearing none, I'd like to put the motion up for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Hearing none. Move on to item 2G, committee charter membership. And before I take this any further, I'm gonna just, Mr. Calhoun, how do you want to move this over to the next meeting so to review, or what would you like to do?
I would like, I have 3 changes I wanted to make that I will need to send over to all of you for input. So I think we can move it to the next one. But really the 3 changes I wanted to make were to under the committee membership portion of the charter. Basically the first paragraph on the second line where it says the committee shall be comprised of at least 6. I wanted to add and no more than 9. And then also the quick typographical change in there, board members and at least 1 individual with information technology expertise. But then also on the second paragraph of the committee membership, looking at saying non-board members wishing to serve on the Audit and Finance Committee will be required to submit formal application to submit a formal application, a resume, and a letter of interest. Following submission, the Audit and Finance Committee will make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees for final approval. So those 2 minor changes, but it will help us move forward with how we actually start bringing people onto the committee. Those were the quick changes, but like I said, I can send that over to everyone so we can take a look at it and have a vote at the next meeting for approval at the October meeting.
Excellent, great. That's good news, Darren. Any comments on the changes that Mr. Calhoun's proposing? Ms. Carlin?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Darren. That's great. And so I'd like to make a motion to postpone this over to the September. Put it on the September. Labor Day, it's right. like to make a motion to postpone this item to the October Audit and Finance Committee member. Do I have a second meeting? All in favor, say
Aye.
all against, say nay. The motion passes, and we'll take this up again in October. Thank you very much, Darren. On to item 3, to the information items. Item A is an information technology IT steering committee quarterly report. Mr. Nawaki.
Mr. Grabowski. So I'd like to present the agenda and the meeting minutes from our August 10th meeting. So as requested by the committee members, we really kind of wanted to give an update each meeting about what's going on, what budgets we're spending, where we are in our budgets, and some future goals. So we went over our summer projects, and we had a lot of good work that happened, mainly an asset inventory that we were able to perform in every single school. That allowed us to get all of our IT equipment into our financial asset inventory software package, just for better understanding of what we have and where it is. Had a lot of projects this summer also related to security related issues, and we made a lot of progress in that area. We went over the fiscal 24 project expenditures, breaking down all the funding minus the ESSER funds. And we also had a good security update this quarter. From June to the first week of August, our goal is a 75% rating of not critical, but lower instances, and we reached our highest was a 74% achieved, which is a pretty good rating. And Mr. Lauer, one of our committee members, had brought up a topic about a software package that everyone uses, but we didn't realize the ramifications that we could find ourselves in. And through his bringing that topic up, we were able to do some research and actually find out that we need to make some changes to our corporate approach to Java. And so we did a Java audit, and we're in the process of remediating that so we don't find ourselves in trouble. We also broke down the software budget. Mr. Duke had asked us what the breakdown of how much of it was actual hard software, how much of it was maintenance, and how much it was licenses. So we broke all that down pretty detailed. And then in our once around, under Mr. Duke's guidance, we decided we want to do another community activity. So we're going to put together a presentation and offer it to schools for parents and students about just basic internet security. And the whole team really thought that was a great idea. So we're going to put some effort into that and get that ready. And that ends the report.
Any questions from the committee members?
Sorry, this is a small question, but we mentioned the goal is 75%. And can you explain what is 75%? I didn't 75% of what?
When we do our nightly vulnerability scans, 100% is almost going to be impossible because every night some vendor makes updates or changes to their software. So we get rated by the vulnerabilities that are exposed, whether it's a critical, a moderate, a mild, or just for information. So the more criticals you have, the lower your score gets. So 75% of perfect. So our goal, which is kind of a standard business practice in the IT industry, that's kind of our benchmark of what our goal is. So like our highest was a 74, but then when Microsoft comes out with one of their vulnerability update patches, then it gets exposed and now we're down to 50 again. So it bounces. It's a constant moving target, but just the fact that we're now on the upper end instead of the lower end means that our IT staff is really doing a great job of keeping up with these patches and updates.
Got it. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
It's interesting because I've been looking at the policy with the school district on cell phones. And then visiting schools, I've noticed that it's pretty not uniform. And I think this is going to be something that's going to have to be brought up to the board. I don't know how that falls into whatever technology we could have. I do know in some of the meetings that I've attended on ChatGPT that security issue is becoming huge, which is why I really would like to see the school district enforce some type of, preventing any student from using a cell phone in a classroom. I mean, it's in our policy. we have that right. I mean, I would like to review the policy to refrain from using the phones during lunch, because I think, now that we're involved in some litigation with the social medias, we're only helping them by, allowing them to use at lunch. I mean, it's just the security side of it. I know from what we're doing, on the state side of it, it's just amazing, on the firewalls and everything that we're putting into our cell phones. I know I can't touch a student's cell phone, but I know this access to phones during the schools is got to be, it's nerve wracking. And I don't know if it's something that the IT committee should look into and help us as we start to look at some of these policies, but it's definitely something that is on the radar for further discussion.
So two comments to that, Mr. Growski. The first one is related to use of personal cell phones by students, and that's something we will have to clearly work through learning services, deputy superintendent, because that's technically not an IT related issue, although our ability for them to connect to the internet, there's an issue there that we've worked through. The second topic you mentioned is ChatGPT, and there are multiple providers of similar artificial intelligence out there. ChatGPT is just one type. We have realized that we can't stop that. So one of the things that Mr. Naraki did this summer was he did present that to the educators, the topic of ChatGPT, explain to them what it was. We are essentially in a position where we have to embrace what's out there and just make sure we're using it wisely and people know how it can be used to benefit students and staff. So that's, I'll turn over to Tom. If Tom, you want to elaborate that on any more on ChatGPT or AI?
Yeah, so like Mr. Burley said, we found that at first we blocked ChatGPT back. It started in November of last year. January, we blocked it until there were dozens and dozens of artificial engines that started coming out. Now they're built into browsers, so we're unable to block them. But what we're trying to do is work with learning services to find a way to help teachers and aid them into how to manage the classroom better, or the use of AI, and sometimes using it to create lesson plans with the understanding that students must be checked, when they turn something in, and be able to say that, hey, I used artificial intelligence, or maybe a verbal communication between the teacher and the student if all of a sudden their grades jump by 20 percentile points. But we're trying to do whatever we can to provide resources and how to help the teachers understand it better and how to embrace it in the classroom. But blocking it is almost impossible. We would have to limit most of the internet. And the cell phones, again, that's going to have to be I think a district wide with learning services and multiple chiefs involved. Because some teachers use that. For instance, they might use an app called Kajeet or Kahoot, and they'll do a lesson plan where the students actually use their phones to respond to a survey and answer questions. So I think everything's worth discussing, but there's so many layers of what they do and what they should or shouldn't do possibly that needs to be discussed.
Yes, Mr. Grabowski, at the direction of the board, I'd be glad to work with you and any members of the board and some principals and teacher leaders to discuss the impact of cell phones in the classroom and the use of them. We'd be happy to collaborate with the board at your direction.
And I agree, learning services has to be involved in this, and I think you do have to embrace it. But, and the policy does have the written policy currently does have the ability for teachers to use cell phones, on directed programs. So that's where an example like ChatGPT would be used and be part of a learning service program. But on the flip side, our servers and everything else, we go to all the protections and then we restrict the teachers. So that's why I think IT really has to be, kind of looking at this and figuring out how we're going to, or just having in the back of their mind as we work with learning services to figure out what the best way to embrace this, because this is just happening so quick. And, I see it every day. It's amazing. You can put it, we ran a test today where we put the same question in, same line of facts, put it in, it spit out an answer within like 5 seconds. Put it in a minute later, it spit out a second answer in 5 minutes. Every time we put the same set of facts and stuff, it spit out a different answer. So that's just the way it works. The internet changes, and when it looks at the question, that's when it's going to give the answer. So it is a Herculean task, but I think the IT department and learning services need to be thinking about it.
One thing that companies that are concerned about confidentiality and privacy on ChatGPT are especially concerned about are employees trying to think through something that involves confidential information and then putting a few of those factoids in their ChatGPT to get color around something, not fully aware that that then becomes part of the ChatGPT universe of information that's somehow out there. And so there could be some necessary training for your staff, in particular, less so teachers, well, even teachers, to the extent they have information about either specific student names or anything that's proprietary or information that needs to be kept confidential by your staff needs to be kept out of ChatGPT.
And the legal fields all make a misstatement, a cite reference, and suddenly you have created a new case which is cited by somebody else and used it, and then it's based back to you because you're the one that made the misrepresentation of the site, and that's all you were doing was putting something in the internet. But you're right, I totally agree with you. So it's definitely an issue that's why I thought I would bring it up. Anyway, great information. I want to thank the IT committee. The report's great. I hope I can explain it in Cal. And Darren, I'm definitely going to need your help on this just in case we get asked some questions about this, but hopefully it will be soon. But anyway, very good. Moving on to item 3B, the monthly capital projects report. Ms. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Grabowski. I'd like to present the July capital projects report. Our revenue collections for June were $218,000 below the cash flow model projections, which are based on the most recent collections with 2% growth over the prior year. However, I would like to point out, we now have 6 months of sales tax collections. And between the 6 months, we have a positive $174,000 in collections. The expenditures for the programs are as follows. And I wanted to first point out that the expenditures are lower in July due to the June accruals that we have to put in, which are reversed out in the month of July for proper accounting. So the 2010 through 2016 program had 0 expenditures. The 2017 through 2022 program had $371,000. The 2023 through 2028 program had $249,000, and the 2023 through 2028 long-term debt projects had $570. As recently stated and previously stated, our fixed cost of ownership fiscal year 24 projects are underway and moving forward. Happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Any questions from the committee members? Thank you very much. Thank you and Mr. Brower definitely for putting the two together, and especially on the revenue projections and how we're spending the money and the number of projects. I mean, I thought we only had 6 waves. I looked at this, we have 7 waves. Moving on to item Item 3D, the monthly financial report. Ms. Carlin.
Thank you, sir. So these are preliminary projections through the end of August 30th. We're still working through our general ledger and scrubbing through different expenditures and making sure we've captured everything that needs to be accrued back. But for the most part, when you look at revenues to date, we've collected $674.6 million, which is approximately $33.9 million over budget. Most of this is attributed to local property taxes to include real property. We saw an increase in motor vehicles as well as manufacturing local taxes. We also saw an increase based upon what we budgeted in delinquent taxes. Another aspect of it was the interest earned on all of our cash accounts, which came in around $6.7 million, and that's also under revenue from local sources. So our biggest increase was due to those 2 items, property taxes and interest income. Although we, on state sources, we are showing a decrease of $2.4 million based upon what we budgeted. And that's a combination of the increase we saw in state aid to classrooms, which was approximately $2.7 million. But then unfortunately, we saw a decrease in property tax relief of $5.2 million. And we're trying to get a little more information on that because that could impact how we budgeted for FY24, unfortunately. And then when you look at expenditures, we spent to date $656.2 million, which is about $3.3 million below budget. And most of that was attributed to salaries and vacancies, savings. But then on the flip side, you also see where we had an increase in substitute services. That's to cover those vacancies as well as any absences. Another part of purchase services that pretty much took us by surprise was the $5.4 million increase in property insurance, which we've been seeing that over the last 2 fiscal years. And I think we will continue to see that based upon some new information that we received about a week ago, which I'll be bringing back to Audit and Finance Committee at an upcoming financial update. Other than that, under total other objects, we knew that we were going to have some expenditures coming out of that category for legal settlements, and so that part of that happened in June, and then another part of it happened in July. And so overall, even though we thought we were going to use about $18.8 million in fund balance for this FY23 budget, we ended up not having to use any of that. And our revenues over expenditures were about $18.4 million that we will be able to add to fund balance. Any questions?
Any questions from the committee?
What will be our closing fund balance after this?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
What will be our closing fund balance after the 18 million goes into it?
Not have those figures with me for this meeting. I apologize. I can provide that in a board update this week. Okay.
But this is $11 million more than what we thought it was last time we
Yes, sir.
saw
Thank
this.
you.
So that's fantastic.
So where was the biggest increase that you've noticed in the last month in expenses?
In expenses. So we knew we were going to come in pretty well with salaries and benefits. And then on purchase services, we could see that we were going to come in a little high on substitute service, but that's always to be expected when you have these kind of vacancies, this many vacancies. But some of the other things that kind of took us by surprise was the property tax insurance. We already knew about the custodial contract increase, but that was such a small amount. And everything else was just smaller amounts that added up quickly. But what I did want to point out is that we had expenditure savings that helped offset some of these, such as student transportation, instructional programs, repairs and maintenance, and in-state travel. I think people still are not traveling a lot, as we come out of the pandemic. Another thing that took us by surprise because we thought it was going to hit in fiscal year 24 was the legal settlements. So, yeah.
So can you help me on the revenue side? I mean, it's great, but how did it end up so different from where we were 2 months ago?
Well, so if you recall, whenever we budget for local tax revenues, we use the current tax year assessments, and we build on top of that a 3% growth rate. And so by the time we get through the budget process, we have a pretty good idea of where we're going to land. But sometimes the assessments come in a lot higher than 3%. But between us and the Charleston County Auditor's Office, we are very conservative and hesitant to put a 6% growth rate on all of these assessments, because one year we saw a drop in motor vehicle and we couldn't explain it. And this year we saw an increase in motor vehicle taxes, and we're trying to explain that. And so he and I do realize that we probably need to go higher than 3%, but just finding that right number, because we sign off on these revenues just to make sure we both are in agreement with how we think things are going to land on local tax revenues.
But don't they make those determinations by the end of the year, calendar year? I mean,
yeah. So I'm supposed to be receiving updated assessments now that will factor in what we did for FY24 budget. So even though I did factor that in probably back in December or January on the financial update. Things came in a lot higher than even he and I, projected or realized until year end when it was all said and done.
So our local projections were up, but our state contributions were down.
Well, no, our state aid to classroom was actually up. That's our new funding formula just for the state. That was up, or excuse me, we saw an increase of $2.7 million in that.
It's an increase.
But what we did see as far as a decrease was in our property tax relief funding. And I have not had a chance to reach out to the state to find out what happened there, but that may impact how we've budgeted for FY24 once I know specifically what happened there.
And what's the source of the property relief from the state?
What's the source?
Yeah, I'm just
It's a
I understand
formula.
state aid,
Yeah,
but-
I mean, it's a formula and normally we're given that amount by the State Department or by the
Okay.
State Department of Education. Yeah. Excuse me, let me correct myself. We usually get that from the Department of Revenue.
Any further questions for Ms. Carlin from the committee? Hearing none, we'll go on to item 4, which is to decide what items for the board meeting. I would say everything that we've discussed, with the exception of one motion that we postponed for October. You want to go through them? So it'd be action items 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, 2E, 2F, and then on to information. I would recommend that we have the information technology people available or somebody available should, staff want to ask questions that Mr. Calhoun and I can't. Then obviously, Ms. Carlin and Ms. Casella, you'll be able to cover all the other information items on B. And we'll obviously keep in the ESSER, Dr. Gallion being in attendance, and the monthly financials. Does that sound like a good list?
Oh, Trina was just mentioning, we don't normally send the item 3A to the board.
Which one's that?
That's the Information Technology Steering Committee quarterly
We
report.
normally don't. We just send the actual report. Do we put the board, or do they just take it from? I'm just trying to figure out how, if somebody asked me about it, they would just go to our meeting.
Yeah, she's just saying we don't typically send that to the board.
Okay, so I'll just cover it on Cal briefly. Then that way, because it'll still be on ours. Should somebody want to pull it off, they can pull it off from there. Okay, that's good. So we'll take that off. Good. Do I need a motion for that? No, we don't need a motion. Let's just go straight through. It's just for information purposes, right? The next upcoming meeting is on October 2023. With that, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
Say the meeting date again.
October 3rd, October 3rd. Tuesday, October 3rd. Okay. With that, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor, stand up.